Hi everyone, lovely to see you all on screen today. I wish I could see all your faces. I do a lot of on-campus events as well, which is actually quite nice when I can get to meet you all. But this is a great way for me to reach out to you about some opportunities that we've got for 2020. So I'm Maria Forrest. I work for KPMG China. I used to live and work in Hong Kong and China, and I used to run the graduate program for KPMG across China. What I do now is I kind of relocated back to the UK, and I look after our overseas Chinese students. So basically we take around 1/3 of our overseas intake every year from overseas universities, mostly in the UK, Canada, Australia and the US, and a good chunk come from the UK, and actually a very good chunk come from Manchester University. So obviously I'm very busy on campus, off campus now with these kind of virtual webinar events. And I also base myself sometimes in the London office and carry out some assessments from there. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is some of our opportunities for 2020. We're quite limited now for 2019, but I'll talk you through our professional services, audit, tax and advisory. I'll talk to you about how to apply and when. And then I put Q&A at the end here, but what I will actually do is on the last slide here has got my email address, so I won't do a live Q&A feed. I will ask you to pop me an email with any questions that I haven't answered throughout the session. Hope to cover off most, as I've done a lot of these now, so I tend to know what kind of questions are going to come up. But as I say, do feel free to drop me an email with any questions after this. So we recruit around 1,300 to 1,500 graduates per year across KPMG China. We recruit, as I say, around 1/3 from overseas. But generally of our intake into our 3 service lines, we take around half into audit and equally split tax and advisory for the remaining half. I tend to say if you're really keen on joining Big 4 accountancy firm, services firm, but you're a little bit unsure what to do, then audit is a really good starting point. The reason I say that is because you get an amazing overview of how a company operates, how it maximizes, profit, how it minimizes risk, how it stays healthy, how it stays alive in hard times. So audit is an amazing overview. And what you tend to do, obviously, when you go into audit, we have many different industries with clients in, but you tend to end up specializing in a few industries, sometimes even one, if there's huge amount of clients in that industry. So audit is a really good stepping stone for, in terms of 10 to 12 years, you can become an audit partner. Then the world is really your oyster. Example, you could become a specialist in the hospitality industry and then become CEO of the Marriott Group, for example, after that, whereas tax and advisory are more limited in your business career later. You tend to have to stay within that area, whereas audit can be an amazing stepping stone. If you become a qualified auditor in a Big 4 firm and reach partner level, then seriously, you've got an awful lot of opportunities ahead of you quite early on in your career. So tax then, we recruit a lot of overseas students into tax actually, a little bit under the radar in terms of service offerings for graduates. So our tax is quite an international area, and it's got a lot of international partners in. And what as a student you might do in tax is, so a company might come to us, say a Starbucks or a big coffee chain, say I want to set up my business in South Africa, in Australia and in the US, and I want you to help me manage my taxes to do that. So we then have to review that situation to see if that's going to be worthwhile setting up that business from a tax perspective. We also then have to help them set up their taxes. So like law, a lot of law students go into tax. It's all about different jurisdictions. So obviously the law in South Africa and the tax law will be completely different from that of the US or the UK. So lots of different transactions, very project based. The other thing I really like about tax is that we have a rotation program for graduates. So if you are a graduate, you want to join professional services, you're quite keen on tax, or actually you're quite open, you do get a rotation program around all the areas of tax in the graduate program. It's the only area that we do that, so that you can get a little bit of an idea what floats your boat and where you'd like to end up. And we found that this has been hugely successful, and again, very popular with returning overseas students. Advisory then, this is our consulting arm. See, this is where we're competing with Big 4, of course, but the Boston consulting groups and the Accentures of the world. I know a lot of overseas students are really keen to go into this area. We take obviously a lot of students into this area. A lot management consulting, risk consulting, deal advisory, strategy is one of our newer areas. Obviously, the biggest buzzword is IT at the moment. Try not to make advisory your default. I don't want to undersell it, but I know a lot of you doing kind of more business-based degrees think that consulting would be for you, but please don't rule out audit. It's really worth looking into audit and where you can go with it and how quickly you can go with it. If you do go into advisory, you do tend to have to pick a lane and stay with it, which is fine. It's very exciting, but just be aware that there are other things than advisory. To have a little look at the structure then and how much we've changed within advisory is amazing really over the years. So these are the areas that I've just mentioned and what comes kind of under them. I was actually talking to a lot of the overseas contacts today. We're still recruiting for 2019 actually for actuarial advisory in Hong Kong. So if you're a Hong Kong national and you're interested in, you know, if you're quite mathematical, risk management, that kind of thing, then that might be something for you. So these are the different areas. Technology, consulting, obviously very, very exciting at the moment, IT advisory, cyber security, that kind of thing. So lots of areas to consider. And I would say, if you do want to go into advisory, then you need to know why, which area and why you want to be in that area, because obviously it's fiercely competitive. So make sure you know why you want to go into it and which area and what you do to qualify to kind of be successful in that area. So let's talk a little bit more specifically about you personally now, guys. So when you're an overseas student going home to China, so obviously I've been doing this job a long time now. I've been running this overseas campaign for the best part of 4 and a bit years, and obviously ran the campaign across China for KPMG for many years as well. So I know the differences between the two markets, and I know what we're looking for across China in terms of our overseas intake. And the first thing I'd like to bring up when we're talking about things that you need to start thinking about are the professional examinations, so the professional qualification really. So if you're going to go home to China and you'd like to work in audit, you do need to do the CICPA, which is the Chinese obviously audit exams. A lot of overseas students struggle with this a little bit because obviously it's going back towards your Chinese methodologies, Chinese ways of working. But equally, you can't sign an audit in China legally if you haven't done the CICPA. So just bear in mind, particularly for audit and most of tax, you would need to do the CICPA. Now the workload, the next point then, in the peak season, a lot of people do ask me, which is one of the Q&As that I tend to anticipate, do you work long hours at KPMG? And the answer is, well, yes, we do, particularly in the audit peak season, which is kind of January time. You would be working very, very long hours. All of your clients on your entire portfolio need to be audited at the same time. So of course, that's huge amount of work to do. So all I would say is that more and more over the years that I've been doing this role, companies in China, they have really had to change their ways in terms of being taskmasters and driving their staff there to be all hours. It's much more competitive now. Employers have to reach out to you. You have to want to work for them. You're not always just so lucky to get the job. We're lucky to have you. So more and more Chinese employers now are offering lots of different ways to achieve work-life balance. And that includes putting a lot less pressure on when it comes to staying late. And you'll find that in audit, yes, you're very busy in the winter when all of your clients are looking for their audit. However, in the summer when it's really quiet, you would be leaving your desk at 5:30 and going off to have dinner with your family or your friends. And we offer what's called a My Life program, where we have, you know, various gym memberships, restaurant vouchers, or lots of health and well-being opportunities. We give you a certain amount that you can spend on something of your choice, whether you're a working parent or whether you want to join a marathon team or whatever it might be. So we offer lots of ways to support that. And you'll find across China, more and more employers are doing that now. For global mobility then, so at KPMG globally, you normally have to work for about 3 years as a graduate before you qualify for a global mobility program. That's mostly because overseas, it's very hard to obtain a visa for any non-national unless they have got a professional qualification and 3 years experience, and that's relevant for the US, Australia, Canada, the UK, China, anywhere really. So after you've kind of done that, you tend to have lots of opportunities available for you to travel overseas, whether you wanted to come back to the UK to work permanently for a year, or for a short while, or go somewhere else. Japan is very popular amongst our mainland Chinese intake who want to go and learn Japanese. So lots of different mobility programs at your fingertips once you've got that bit of experience, and usually the qualification which is required, as I say, to get the visa. While we're on the topic of visas, if you are from the UK, if you're studying in the UK and you want to go back to China, you would probably, if you're from mainland China, you need to apply for mainland China. If you're from Hong Kong, you need to apply for Hong Kong. We're all KPMG China, but unfortunately at the moment, the two governments still won't give us visas between those two locations. However, all I would say is there's a fair bit of movement, obviously, between Hong Kong and mainland China. Again, once you've got that qualification, or to be honest, sometimes a bit before, lots of travel. So if you're from Hong Kong, but you really wanted to get a taste of the mainland Chinese market, it won't be long before you have opportunities to do an audit over there, or particularly PRC tax, for example. There's a lot of opportunities to go back to China to do that. And if you're mainland Chinese and you're interested in coming to Hong Kong, then again, you'd either need to wait the 3 years and we'd get the visa for you, or there'd probably be quite a lot of smaller mobility programs available within audit for you to get that taster of the different markets as well. So obviously in doing this role, I often go back to Hong Kong or China each year to talk to the team. I work really closely with the China team about what we're going to do the following year and how we're going to improve things for our intake. And in doing so, I tend to meet up with students like you who have returned back to China and maybe worked at KPMG for a year or so, maybe who I met on campus. And I also chat with our partners about our overseas students and how they're performing against their local counterparts. What I tend to hear is more and more now, the level of English of returning students, especially those that have done a master's, is getting less and less in terms of quality. So what's really important for all of you, especially if you're only doing a master's, not only, but you're only there for a year, here for a year, you must make sure that you put yourself out there and get those English skills going. Because one of the advantages of studying overseas is the language skills that you pick up. So make sure that you do kind of make that an advantage, and make sure that when you go back and you're asked what are your strengths, you can actually say, yeah, my English is really strong. When you're asked which language you'd like to do your interview in, it would be great if you could say you're confident enough to do it in English. So that's just one of the observations, and certainly one of the more positive observations, don't want to tell you off, is that overseas students are much more adaptable, much more independent, much global mindset, really lateral in their thinking, good presentation skills, and all these things are more and more important to businesses like KPMG or professional services firms. So when it comes to those kind of skills and behaviours, they're the things that you need to be exploiting throughout your selection process in terms of your strengths, your adaptability, your global mindset, that kind of thing, flexibility. I can imagine that a lot of your local counterparts haven't had to find their own place to live, or had some of the difficulties that might come with administration when you arrive in a new country. So all of those things add to who you are, make who you are. So definitely start thinking about those kinds of things for your actual interviews, that kind of stuff. So in terms of our selection process, then you can apply for KPMG China and KPMG UK at the same time. They're two separate application systems. You will have to go through both those application systems, but they're not linked, so you don't have to share any information between the two. It is reasonably easy for you guys to stay in the UK. There is a 3-month window from your graduation date during which your visa needs to be sponsored by our UK team. I know that can be problematic for master's students, but unfortunately there's not a lot that can be done about that at the moment. One important thing to notice is that at KPMG China, we will accept you 1 year later from your graduation, as we know the timing can be tricky. The UK firm are quite flexible about that too. So if you're struggling with timelines, visas, complications, then just try to relax, and you can apply 1 year later. And we appreciate that you can't always get back to China for selection, etc. So try not to panic about it. So let's talk in a little bit more detail then. So when you apply for KPMG, obviously the first thing you do is fill out an application form. And then when that application form is successful, we would invite you to go through our online aptitude test. So we would send you the link for that, obviously, so you can do that here in the UK. So when it comes to the application form, I know most application forms are pretty similar, but try to think about why you want to work for that company. I'm not just talking about KPMG now, let's give you some general tips about Obviously, all companies, they have similar values. Websites are very similar. Everyone's does the best this and the best that. But try to make it a little bit more personal to you. If I was interviewing somebody and I said, why do you want to work for KPMG? I would actually prefer they said something like, because KPMG has a great marathon team, or because I'm really interested in this particular CSR activity, or I really want to join a football team, as opposed to actually somebody who says, it's very global, I want to work for a team, and all of those slightly more kind of textbook answers. But try to make it a little bit more personal to you. Think about the corporate values, of course, because they're all on the website, but think about why they're important to you, and try not to cut and paste between application forms, because it's quite obvious to people if what you've written is quite generic and relevant to most companies. So as I say, just try to personalize it a little bit. And when you do get sent the link to the assessment test, which is not guaranteed, so do try to put all your effort into that application form. When you do get sent the link, try not to panic about it. There's not a lot you can do to become good at aptitude tests, but one thing you can do is practice them, because like you probably know with any exam or any test that you do, if you practice, you're a little bit more relaxed going into it. So, and literally just be really practical about it. I'm going to sit at this desk, I'm going to use this laptop, I'm going to click on this and have a little look. But try to remember that aptitude is not, if you don't get through aptitude test, it doesn't mean that you're not clever, okay? That's why I've put the definition here for you. It's inherent in the person, in their mental process, as opposed to be reflective of your personality or how clever you are. So if you don't get through aptitude test, don't worry about it. It just means that at this particular time in your life, this might not be the right job for you. Aptitude tests are really accurate in terms of assessing that person's success in the role. It's still one of the highest indicators of that. So kind of take that on board and try not to worry about it. Perhaps this isn't the right time. I did lots of aptitude tests as a graduate and I didn't pass any of them. But then when I became an experienced hire, I had to do them to join KPMG 10, 15 years ago successfully. So it does depend on the time and the place and where you are at that time. So this is just actually a link to our aptitude test, just in case you wanted to have a practice. And obviously I realise you can't read that, but I just wanted to give you an idea of the layout. So you would do logical, verbal and numerical reasoning. And we also do a situational judgment test, which is quite interesting. So that will throw up scenarios for you about what you might, a situation you might be in at work and what you would do. There tends to be 3 or 4 answers. So 2 might be the best 2 and 2 might be the worst 2, and you get scored according to that. So have a go at that as well. Gives you good insight as well into what you might be doing, the kind of decisions you have to make when you start work. So what are employers looking for then? So obviously this is all very textbook and you can find this anywhere online. But the reason I always include this in my presentation is just for you guys now, if you're thinking about 2020 graduate recruitment or even 2019, and you're going to go for an interview, you need to start thinking about examples of how you've demonstrated some key skills and behaviours that most employers are looking for. Obviously, it'll be paraphrased, it will be different words, it will be very unique to that business and how they want to express themselves. But it will help you when you go into your interview if you've thought of a few examples of where you've kind of communicated confidently, or where you've had to be a leader, where you've had to be a team player. And in terms of commercial awareness and global mindset, they're the kind of things that you kind of just get into the conversation as opposed to have to demonstrate an example of. Just try to keep all these buzzwords in your head. Say you've prepared 3 or 4 examples before you go into an interview. That's amazing, because you've got a few things to draw on that will give you a bit of time to relax before you answer the next question. So we are recruiting now for our 2020 graduate intake. Okay, the deadline is the 6th of June. So you need to apply online by the 6th of June. And then what we would do is we would send you a link to our online aptitude test if you're successful. And then ideally, we would invite you to go through assessment centre back in the summer in China or Hong Kong, wherever you're from, wherever you're applying for. We're trying to do this so that you guys can secure a position before you start your final year at university, so you don't have to worry about it in your final year. We did it last year, it was hugely successful, and it allowed people to focus on their final year of study as opposed to have to worry too much about all the autumn campus recruitment, etc. If they already had their job, they could just focus on getting stuck in, getting their dissertation written, etc. So we will still allow you, obviously, later an application opportunity in the autumn campus season. However, you would then need to get back quite quickly, also in the autumn, to go through a selection process. That's why I strongly advise that you have a go at the early offer intake and apply by the 6th of June, just to buy yourself that bit more time. Even if it means that you still don't go for the interview until October, at least you'll get the ball rolling and you'll give yourself that little bit more time. So as I say, assessment centre and interviews. At the moment, back in China and Hong Kong, the assessment centre is a group discussion and a manager interview, followed by a partner interview. So kind of 3 stages, if you like. Then hopefully, if you're still home, you go through an offer reception party and receive your offer and everything. In terms of pre-onboarding, we register you for the professional exams. So you don't have to worry about anything like that. You don't have to worry about starting any professional exams or registering. So we send you all the links and register you and pay for all the early registration and all of that. We take any degree discipline. As I say, all we ask is that obviously if you're from mainland China, you start by applying for one of our cities, our 18 cities across China. And if you're from Hong Kong, you need to apply for Hong Kong originally. It doesn't matter which degree you're from. We love the diversity. So we'll take any, we've got partners with chemistry degrees. Of course, those of you studying accounting or business will have much more knowledge and interest in a professional services firm. Equally, there's a conversion program where we would train non-accounting majors to go through that extra bit of training so that you're ready to start and particularly join the audit profession. So I've put my email here for you guys to drop me a line. Do feel free to do so. I'll be on email most of the afternoon, so do just feel free to drop me a line, as opposed to I probably won't stay on the live Q&A feed. I'll receive the emails and respond to you in that way. I think I've just about covered everything. So thank you guys for listening. I'm your graduate desk. Let me put my email back. So we've got lots of cities across China. Each has its own graduate desk, but I like to see myself as the overseas graduate desk. Yeah, so just drop me any line that you like. If you're graduating in 2019, we are mostly full up across China, but you can still apply for 2020. We'll still take you 1 year later, so you haven't got to worry about that. If you've got issues with your certificates and when you're going to get them, you can still apply for 2020, but it might be that you would slip to the following intake, depending. I know some master students get their certificates quite late. So again, just drop me an email with your specifics. And thank you very much for listening, and I hope to see you all on campus soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.